Why do I love records so much? It's a question that someone asked me this week. I'm going to try and answer it. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome to Northern Revolutions. I'm Rob. Welcome back if you're returning. Welcome if you're new. Why do I love records? I had a conversation this week with a work colleague. We're talking about music, and somehow vinyl records came up in conversation. And they said to me, "Oh, you like records?" And I said, "A little bit." And I showed them a picture of my collection, and they were blown away. They were unaware of the Vinyl Resurgence, and they'd heard that records are kind of a thing, but weren't really aware of the scope of what it's become, and said to me, "Why do you like records so much?" And I thought to myself, there's a lot of reasons I like records, so let's make a video about it. The first thought that comes to mind when I ask myself, why do I love records? It's pretty simple. I love the tactile experience of listening to a record. There's something about pulling the record out of the shelf, taking it out of its sleeve, putting it on the turntable, getting your record brush, cleaning off any dust that's on there, putting the needle above the record, pulling the switch, watching the needle lower to the record, and sitting there and looking at the jacket and holding this thing in your hand and having to get up halfway through the album and flip the record and do that process all over again. I mean, it's a dedicated listening experience, right? It's not really something you just put on and let it go. I mean, you've got to do something in the middle of it. And then there's also, the care that is involved in a record, at least I think for serious record collectors, the putting it in an outer sleeve, putting the disc in a proper inner sleeve to take care of it, cleaning records. All of that is, while it may sound labor intensive, to me, that's part of the enjoyment of the vinyl experience. I love that tactile experience. I love, you have to hold a record by the label and the edge, and you don't touch the playing surface. Those kind of things. I mean, I guess to some folks it may sound a little anal, but I love that whole process of listening to a record. It's not just like pulling up Spotify on your phone or your computer and searching for something and hitting play. I don't derive any enjoyment from that. I like the purposeful act of this chosen physical medium. The second thing that I really think of when I think of why do I love records, there's something to me that there's kind of an authenticity to it. As I mentioned, I don't really derive any enjoyment from, pulling up Spotify and scrolling through a list and hitting the play button. That doesn't sound to me, doesn't feel to me like an authentic listening experience. When I listen to a vinyl record, particularly an old vinyl record, it feels more authentic. And what do I mean by that? Here's an example. This is my UK first pressing mono Beatles for Sale. Obviously, this record initially was not available in North America. We had our North American versions. This is kind of the gatefold with the record in the middle. This is how I prefer to listen to it. A Spotify playlist or something doesn't cut it. You've got the CD, and while it's fine, right? I mean, this is modern, and not there's anything wrong with that, but when I listen to this, This is the genuine artifact. This is what the Beatles put out in their home country in 1964. This is the authentic, real thing. And even if it wasn't a first pressing, whatever, the point is, to me, this kind of experience feels more like I'm listening to the real music than what this does. Listen, I know that probably sounds stupid and maybe only makes sense to me, but on an older record, could be anything. Could be a Creedence record or a Led Zeppelin or whatever. This is, something from the period that it came out in that just feels more authentic and more genuine than Spotify or Tidal or, even a new remastered modern CD. I've talked many times on my channel that vinyl records, for me, there's a lot of nostalgia there. There's a lot of, reminiscing about when I was growing up and listening to music and discovering music. And a lot of that has to do with my dad, who was kind of like me in that regard. The act of listening to records and collecting records, there's a lot of nostalgia there. I listened to a lot of my dad's records when I was a kid. I mean, Rolling Stones' Hot Rocks. I'm not a Stones fan. Everybody knows this. I've talked about it. But I listened to this a lot when I was a kid. This is their stuff from 64 to 71. It's got all the big hits on it from that period. I listened to it a lot when I was a teenager. This copy was my dad's. Layla by Derek and the Dominoes. I remember the first time my dad put this on for me, and I heard the song Layla, and I was blown away. Again, his copy. When I was a young teenager, I went through a really big Beach Boys phase. Not Sam St. John, big Beach Boys, but, I still enjoy the Beach Boys a lot. But I remember searching my dad's collection. Oh, he had a couple Beach Boys records, and this was one of them. And I played this a lot because it had the hits on it, and I didn't know anything of the deep cuts. One of the first records I ever played. My introduction to one of my favorite bands, The Band. I remember when I was kind of singing part of the song up on Cripple Creek because I'd heard it on the radio and I loved it. And my dad said, "Here, listen to this." Again, his copy. There's so many of those memories tied to specific records, but not only that, it doesn't have to be those records. It's just the act of taking a record and putting it on, listening to it, reminds me of how much I enjoyed playing records and discovering music when I was younger. And not to mention, it's my dad's stereo system from when I was a kid. So there's a lot of nostalgia tied into it, both the music and the act of listening to music and some of the actual records themselves and the stereo itself. Whenever I'm listening to, though, it brings me back to my youth and still makes me feel connected to my dad. So nostalgia is a real big part of it. Another big thing, maybe one of the biggest things about collecting vinyl is the hunt. Every record collector knows this. Everyone on the VC knows this. The thrill of the hunt. Today with, Discogs and eBay and whatever, there's not really such a thing as a rare record, only an expensive record. I mean, you can pretty much find anything if you're willing to pay for it. But taking that out of the equation, the thrill of the hunt. I mean, going to record shows, flipping through bins, going to record stores, doing the same thing. Walk around flea markets or antique markets and, ooh, this vendor's got a box of records. Maybe I'll find something in there. And when you flip through there and you find some of those great gems you're looking for. We've all had some of those finds. It's like, I can't believe I found this in a box in a thrift store or whatever. It's just something about the thrill of the hunt is, one of the things that I think just keeps us drawn into this hobby. Yes, it's the music, but it's also the quest for more music and, hopefully I'm going to find that record in the wild. There's some that you look for years and maybe never find. And there's some you look for years and eventually do find. And when you do, there's some elation there, I guess, that drives you to keep looking. So the thrill of the hunt is maybe it's maybe even more fun than actually finding the thing that you're looking for. The next thing I think of, why do I love records? I mean, I think there's something to be said for the aesthetic of it. I love the look of a big collection of records. Granted, I don't have a big collection of records. It's about 800 there. I just added 4 more cubes in there to spread it out a little bit because it was getting a little bit tight. But I love sitting on my couch and looking at that wall of records. And I love coming downstairs with the mindset of, I want to listen to a record. And I sit here on the floor and I sort of start at one end and I'm looking through and I eventually find something that I want to play. Or maybe if I don't, just the act of sitting there and looking through there and I'm like, oh, I forgot I had that. Or I want to pull that out and look at it. I just love the look of a nice organized collection of records. Superficial, I know, but I love the aesthetic of a vinyl record collection. And last, but certainly not least, why do I love records? I love the vinyl resurgence. There is so much new stuff and new old stuff coming out. And that is very exciting. I mean, some examples that I think of off the top of my head, just about every artist is releasing things on vinyl these days when they put out a new album. But we're seeing a lot of now is autographed vinyl. Many artists do a lot of pre-orders on vinyl nowadays. I don't know that you really saw a lot of that back in the heyday of the CD. I don't remember it. Very, very common to be able to buy autographed vinyl nowadays. Another thing that the Vinyl Resurgence has done is we've seen a lot of anniversary reissues on vinyl. Here's an example. Gravedancers Union by Soul Asylum. Great album from the 90s, but this anniversary edition that came out on Vinyl Me Please, double disc. A whole disc of live and alternate, unreleased stuff on a cool colored vinyl. This we see a lot nowadays with vinyl. It kind of gives the label or the artist an excuse to re-release something. But I love it because now we have this album with some extra stuff. Fantastic. Another thing I love is labels and artists are getting very creative with the actual records that they're putting out. We're getting to see very cool things like this that look like this. Very cool. Clear records and transparent and solid colored vinyl and, splatters and whatever. Some people say they don't like colored vinyl. It doesn't sound great. I don't know. I'm not an expert. To me, it sounds just fine. And I just love that it adds another layer of creativity to it. And I think they're fantastic. I love that independent artists are able to self-release their own vinyl nowadays. Unheard of 20 years ago, 30 years ago. There are short-run vinyl pressing places everywhere. So you can get artists that release an album by themselves without the backing of a label. Amazing. I love that albums that never saw the light of day on vinyl back in the 90s, at the peak of the CD, are now being made available on vinyl for the first time. I love that we're seeing a rise in these crazy box sets. Yeah, some of them are expensive, granted. I'll give you an example. This is the Beatles' Let It Be box. A new stereo mix of the album. Okay. A mono mix of the album. Fine. The Glenn Johns mix of Get Back. Cool. If you're a big Beatles fan, we've waited for this forever. All kinds of studio outtakes and demos and all that kind of stuff. Yes, this is available on CD as well, as many of the big box sets are these days. But I gotta wonder if the vinyl resurgence is to credit for these big box sets. If we were just doing CDs, I don't know that, we would see these big giant box sets because, vinyl has, I think, spurred people's interest in owning physical media again in a way that CDs haven't for 25 years. So I think because of the popularity of the vinyl medium, we get to see some of these incredible treasures. What a crazy idea that in 2024, the biggest selling physical medium is a medium that is 60 years old. That's crazy. With all the technologies we have, we carry more technology in our smartphone, in our pocket, than the astronauts took to the moon. Everything about technology these days is to make life simpler and easier, except when it comes to music. Yes, you can listen to any song in the world on your phone, but what vinyl does is it creates an experience. But vinyl is not a convenient medium by any means. It's not portable. It's not easy to carry around. It takes up a ton of space. It requires, significant equipment, turntable, amplifier, speakers, whatever else. It is not an easy medium. There's care involved. There's cleaning. There's maintenance. There's proper storage. There's a lot to enjoy vinyl properly. And yet, vinyl is booming. Why is vinyl booming? I think for many of the reasons that I talked about. Long-winded explanation, I suppose. But those are the reasons that I absolutely love this medium and I love this hobby. And it is without question the way that I prefer to enjoy music. Let me know in the comments what draws you to vinyl. That's everything for me today, everybody. Catch you on the flip side.